I know why you're not getting better. I really actually do. I've been doing this a while and I understand most of the reasons why you do not get better at playing the piano or anything musical that you're doing. And to be honest, a lot of these things apply no matter what you're trying to get better at. So we're going to go through this list, this kind of checklist of things that if you are not doing, you will not get better. It's going to be fairly negative for the first half of the video. I apologize. It just is the way my brain made sense. You know, you're not getting better, so you're probably not doing these things. The first is the most obvious one, which is you're not practicing. If you're not getting better, but you don't spend any time doing the thing that you say you want to do, you need a good hard look in the mirror and go, what am I actually wanting to do with my time? Now, I've mentioned this in other videos. I personally think that we are not kind enough to ourselves. We are actually really pretty good at picking and choosing what we think is important and how we spend our time. The problem is we tend to have a very short-sighted mindset. So if you just got back from work, guess what the most best use of your time probably is? That's probably relaxing because work was very mentally taxing, even if it wasn't physically taxing. And so you need a little bit of a break. The problem is we get into this doom loop because, again, we're a little bit lazy, all of us. And so we're going to appreciate that relief of not working. And so then we just start relaxing, and then we forget things like practicing. Let me move on to the next thing. You check that box. You go, no, I am practicing. Well, are you practicing the right things? Or are you kind of fooling yourself into playing instead of practicing? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes what happens is we sit down at the piano and we just play songs that we already know well, and we keep doing the things that we're already comfortable with because it's uncomfortable to be uncomfortable. But to make progress, we need to be uncomfortable. And where does that lead us? To this next thing, which is not having goals. If we don't know what the right things are, how in the world are we going to practice them? How do we know what the right things are? Well, by having specific goals. I want to play Don't Stop Believing. Well, any day you spend not practicing Don't Stop Believing is probably a missed opportunity then. And then you go into the next part, which is you don't have the right practice techniques. Now, I am not going to spend a lot of time going through and listing all of the right practice techniques. And again, that seems kind of loaded. The right, it sounds like there's one way to do it. No, there's not one way to do it. There's a million different ways to practice. But if you don't know some advanced practice techniques, you are really missing out. Singing what you're playing, eyes closed for the piano, short chunks, metronome work, phrasing work, all of these things, mindfulness work, all these things really matter with being able to work and learn a piece of music. And so if you don't have those right practice techniques, it can be very difficult even if you know what goals you have. And then you might not have the right attitude. I like to talk about dark side practicing versus light side practicing. Like Star Wars. Sometimes we just get really pissed off. And when we get really pissed off, it motivates us because we're angry at ourselves and we're angry at the world and we go, I'm going to do this thing. Don't get me wrong. I've practiced that way a lot. But you're going to reach a point of diminishing returns because the best piano playing, the best music making comes from a place of joy and relaxation. Even if the song is angry and emotional and whatever, it always comes from a place of joy and relaxation. So sometimes our attitude is a mismatch and is not really working in our favor, and we really need to channel more of what I would call the light side practicing, where we're going to be much more focused on things being relaxed and meditating and calm and mindfulness and almost having no thoughts in our brain and just enjoying being and being okay with mistakes, stuff like that. It might be that you're not practicing long enough. And you may go, wait, why didn't you bring that up like right after the practicing? Well, here's the deal. If you're practicing at all, you're probably making some level of progress. But there is a point where you need to increase the input if you're actually going to make progress. I think the two major times that this happens is one, when you start to get to serious classical pieces or serious improv or serious blues playing. Anytime you get to that like initial bump where you're like, okay, I'm out of learning stuff and getting those easy gains, and now I got to put the rubber where it meets the road and really get good at this. you're going to have to up the practice time. 30 minutes has to turn into an hour, hour needs to turn to 2 hours. The other one is where you go, I'm going to be a professional at this. I am going to be excellent and make zero mistakes when I play something. There's a big difference between making 5 or 10 mistakes and making 0 to 1 mistakes. It's incredibly hard and requires a ton of time. Again, there's a ton of stuff written about how getting from 0 to 80% is very easy. Getting from 80 to 90 is much harder. Then 90 to 95 is really, really hard. 95 to 98 is incredibly hard. And then that last little bit is so incredibly hard. It might be as well that you have a mismatch of time frames and goals. So what do I mean by that? Let's imagine that, let's go back to what I said at the beginning. I want to play Don't Stop Believing. That is not an incredibly hard piano song, but if you are a beginner or even an intermediate, it would be quite a challenge to learn it. And you say, I want to learn it in 1 week. Well, you're not going to be making a lot of progress because you're going to be panicking. You're going to be practicing the left hand, right hand, whatever, and trying to put it together. I mean, you may make a lot of progress, but you're probably not going to meet your goal. And then you're going to be frustrated and be like, I didn't get where I wanted to be. Well, it was because you had a goal and time frame mismatch. It can actually go the other way as well. Let's say that you wanted to play for church and you just wanted to learn a few chords so you could play for church. I know people are like, it's going to take me a year to get there. No, it's going to take you like a month at max, even coming from literally never touching a piano in your life. So other instruments I think are much harder in this regard than piano. Piano has many short-term goals that work really well. Guitar is a good example of an instrument where if someone said, hey, I want to play chords for church on acoustic guitar, I may tell them, hey, just get used to sounding bad for like 6 months. Because there's literally physicality of playing the chords that's so hard for people when they first start out. You need to be honest with yourself and have that match up. The other thing that goes along with this is how much time are you actually committing? If you only practice 2 days a week for 30 minutes, you really should lower your expectations. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Life is busy. Not every person has to have music be their top priority, but that's really a goal and resource mismatch when we have an extreme goal, but then our practice is very low. So you either have to lower the expectations or raise the amount of time we put in. On the other hand, I do think people sometimes do the opposite where they're practicing a ton, but then they start playing the same songs that they already know. And then they're like, I don't get it. I spent 15 hours practicing. And you're like, yeah, but you played the same song like 10,000 times as opposed to moving on to something that would be challenging to you. How do we start to break out of these things? Because let's be honest, nobody sets out to be mediocre. I mean, I hope not. That's generally not something that people do where they're like, yes, I want to be a 5 out of 10 piano player. That's not really a normal thing that people say they want to do. So how do we break out of these? I would say quiet time, just reflection before you even practice, just sitting around thinking. And then what you're going to find is, even if you're not asking yourself, what are my goals? What am I doing with my life? It's going to start bubbling up. It'll be uncomfortable, but I find that is huge for myself to have some quiet time. Motivational techniques, I think as well, having little tricks and tips, hey, I got a piece of candy that's waiting for me at the end of my practice session. Oh, instead of playing video games, I'm first going to play piano and then I'll go play video games or whatever you like to do to relax. Stuff like that, putting something positive at the end, giving yourself a negative incentive, going like, I have to do this if I do piano, or putting it first thing in the morning. Anything you can think of that's going to motivate you, that's going to push you forward, that's going to be huge. A teacher and mentor cannot be understated. Having someone outside of yourself, I don't care how disciplined you are as a human being, having somebody outside of yourself that's going to hold you accountable and push you is huge, especially when you're talking about all these things that we talked about, right practice techniques, having goals, having the right attitude, knowing how long to practice, knowing what goals are appropriate. These are all things that someone who has done it before will be able to really guide you on. Couple more things. Breaks. It could possibly be that you actually are spending enough time, but you're not giving yourself time to let your brain process it. Learning piano is similar to working out. If you want your muscles to grow, guess when they grow? They grow when you're sleeping. You're going to be getting better at piano mostly when you're asleep, if you're practicing regularly. I should say that. If you're not practicing, you're not getting any better in your sleep. The final one is patience. And that may seem a little counterintuitive because I just said why you're not achieving your goals, why you're not doing what you want to do. But ultimately, being patient is going to give you that long-term view that's necessary. Again, if you just want to learn one song, you can do that in a couple months, couple hours a day. Boom, done, no problem. If you want to get really good and understand your instrument, that is years. And if you have that long-term view, you can learn things right and in a way that actually is going to save you a lot of time when you think about that long time frame. I'm Robert Monroe. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, follow, all that jazz. Until next time, you guys have a great rest of your day.